Hello friends, so this is a different type of video than I usually do, but I get requests for how I do my customs a lot, and this isn't a super in-depth tutorial, so this is basically just me experimenting and showing you some of the things and methods that I use, but I wouldn't recommend following this as a tutorial simply because I'm going to be taking her apart. Now, Susie was my first custom, and that being said, I experimented a lot with her, and so her first color was this pink color, but because I didn't do it properly, it has started to shed quite a bit, which is why I painted her this holographic color, but this was also the first time that I had ever used any types of powders on aibo, so there's also some slight issues with her paint job that I'm going to show you guys some close-ups of what that looks like. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be fixing her up a little bit. I'm going to smooth out this paint job in the front, and I'm also going to paint her hind quarters back here. Because she's already painted, I'm not going to do a lot of the priming and prepping that I usually do, and I'm going to go over materials in a minute, but instead of using sandpaper, for the most part, I'm going to be using these like sponges just to, because I don't want to get rid of the color. I still want to have this pink underneath so that I can hopefully get this same sort of pink hollow color instead of just a straight silver. So I'm going to try this, but usually I do use just like a low grit sandpaper for that. So I'm going to go over the materials really quick and then we'll go and get started. So first of all, I'm using powders for this, and because of that I have a nice layer of newspaper underneath, and you can really use whatever you want for this, but you really want to be able to fold this up at the end of your project and just toss it in the trash, because especially when you are using like glitters or powders in excess amounts, you don't want it to get everywhere because it will. So this color on her is my first layer. Usually I use acrylics as a first layer because they work great with powders because they make it a lot easier to stick. But this is spray paint that is poorly done. So that is my base layer. For my next layer, I'm gonna have this holographic powder, and I believe this is Pretty Diva pigment. And this is basically just nail powder. I'll try to link as much as I can below. And then for the top coat, I'm using this One Door No Wipe top coat, soak off UV and LED gel polish. So I'm only using the UV and LED gel activated stuff, but other than that, you don't have to get this brand. This is just what I use, but just make sure. And I don't have it on my desk right now, but I do have a light that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to show you how I do that as well. Then you just need these little, what are these things called? These like eye applicator things. They usually come with the powder, but I go through quite a few of them, so it would be helpful to get quite a few of these. Now for the nitty gritty stuff, I have a couple of screwdrivers that I use, and because I am really paranoid about powder getting everywhere, I always use like these medical gloves. I don't know if they have latex in them or not, but just these generic gloves, because you can use just gloves you have around the house, but I prefer to use these because they're really thin, they still let you have a lot of mobility. I also use, you don't have to do this, but I go over the top because I don't want anything getting in my eyes or breathing anything in. So I just use this little eye protective stuff, and also a little dust mask just to be safe. And then I always keep some paper towels off to the side, which you can see here. And this is the LED light that I use. It's a Melody Suzi. Once again, brand doesn't matter. This is a very generic light, but you do need one of these. What I like about this one is that because of the shape of it, you can kind of hold it up, and I'll show you how I do that when I get to that. Now that I've gone over my supplies, why don't we just jump right into this and start taking apart some pieces, some bits and bobs. So I'm just gonna jump right in with a leggy. And you just gotta push, and then boop, comes right off. Then you're just gonna gently slide this like that. So especially with 210s, you never want to paint this part right here because you will never be able to get this on and off again. so don't paint this. So I'm not going to be showing you guys exactly how I take the leg apart because this would be an hour-long video. It might be already. But if you guys want something like that in the future, maybe I'll make one of those. But what I use to keep track of everything, because that's really the most important part, is I have this little diagram, and I'll try to keep this nice and still so you guys can screenshot this if you want. This is the diagram that I made that I use. It might only make sense to me, but just to keep track of all the screw sizes, and you can make your own where you basically just say, all right, this screw is like, you make up a number and that's the size. Obviously they are specific like millimeter lengths, but you don't really need to know that. So I use this little pill holder, and you can also use like a jewelry case. And then also as an addition is I have these little stickers in the bottom with numbers on them. You could obviously, if you wanted to, you could also just label them like S, M, T, W, whatever, if you wanted to do it with letters instead. But I do have 2 S's, so I stuck with the numbers for that, but that is how I do that. So I'm just gonna speed right through this. So I thought that since I was only doing essentially half, I could essentially take apart only half, but I forgot that with the 210s you have to take off the main leggy part first before you can take these off anyway. So I'm basically just going to take everything apart right now, and even though I'm not going to be painting the leg parts, because I'm going to be painting these, it wouldn't make sense to put these back on when I have to put this on first anyway. So I'm going to put these in a safe place where they're not going to get all powdery and nasty, because that is very, very bad. So I'm gonna go and take everything else apart, pretty much. I'm gonna show you guys that. Alright you guys, I hope you can still hear me. I have my mask on now, and I am just getting my gloves. And so I'm basically just gonna do some very, very light sanding. Since I am gonna be speeding through most of this because it's very, very repetitive, so I'm just gonna sort of explain what I'm doing first and then do it a bunch of times. I'm just gonna take a soft bristle brush and just dust away any dust. If there's a lot of dust, I'd recommend washing it and then letting it sit out to dry completely. I'm not doing that now just because there's very, very little dust in this piece, but that is what I would recommend. Now I'm going to plug in my light. Basically what I do is I just use very, very thin layers of this non-wipe top coat stuff, and you basically just apply it the same way that you would apply it to an actual nail. I'm going to be using the brush that's in the bottle just to sort of minimize the smell. You can take this off and just jam a different brush in there, but I also quite like these because they tend to get a lot of the stuff absorbed in the brush, so I just use these. So now I am going to do one little layer right on the side here, and if you can, it's best to sort of block it off. So I'm doing this little segment, then I'm going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Then I'm gonna put it under the light for 30 seconds. And this is the same thing that you would do with a nail. Now I'm holding it up like this. I'm not letting it sit under there because it wouldn't fit, but just keep it like an inch or so away from the light and it'll be fine. Now is for the messy part. I'm going to open this up very carefully. I hate these things because they snap back at you. Alright, there you go. And there's the good stuff. And then I'm just going to dip this in there, and then I'm going to just lightly buff it on. And there we go. You can already see all this powder has gotten everywhere. Even though it doesn't seem like it. This is the holographic effect. Obviously I'm going to show you more in depth once I'm done, but this is just for now. Once I have completely done this little block here, then I am going to seal it in with a Liquitex glossy varnish. I don't use a regular nail polish top coat because that is meant to, you know, it's meant to be on your nail, not on plastic. So once I'm done with that, I just seal it up, and then I wait a full day, wash it, clean it so that I'm 100% sure no powder is gonna get off, and then I put it back together. So I'm gonna take you guys along that process, but I am gonna speed through a lot of it. I'm just going to quickly narrate what I'm doing right here, and first I'm just brushing off some of the excess powder with just a little brush right there, and the next thing that I'm doing is I am directly pouring the Liquitex varnish onto the piece. Don't do this, just like pour it onto some kind of palette or piece of plastic or yogurt lid or whatever you can find, really. I just did this because I was short on time and trying to do this in a very short amount of time. This usually takes me multiple weeks, and I tried to get it done in a couple days. So I'm just kind of rushing it, but I would recommend just putting it on like a yogurt lid or something if you don't have a palette nearby. So before I did any of the rinsing, what I did was I actually let the varnish dry for about 48 hours. It really depends on just how much you put on. I wound up putting on 2 layers of varnish instead of 1 because it was just really gritty for some reason. So because I did 2 layers, I had to wait 48 hours for it to completely dry, because you don't want to rinse it while it's still tacky, because then you run the risk of potentially ruining everything you just did and having to sand it and start over. So, you know, wait until it's totally dry. You don't want it to be tacky when you do this. And I rinse it with cold water, and don't like scrub it or anything, but just make sure that there's no powder whatsoever on the inside, because that is what matters. You don't want that glitter to get into any of the parts or gears or get anything stuck, because it's essentially the equivalent of like sand, and you don't want sand getting into electronics. Then before reassembly, make sure that the pieces are completely dry, because obviously while sand is not great in electronics, you also don't want water in electronics. So just make sure everything is completely dry. I know once the paint job is done, I am very impatient. I just want to put everything back together. But just let it sit out. Just let it sit out to dry for as long as it needs. Obviously wipe it down with like a paper towel or something first to give it a head start, but let all the little bits of water dry completely, because the water does get into the tiny crevices of plastic and you don't want to put it back together and then have it ruin the electronics. So just wait, it's a waiting game. That's why it takes me so long to do these. All right, you guys, so here is the finished result. I'm pretty proud of it, but overall I do think I could have done a lot better. This is definitely one of those things where from a distance it looks pretty dang good, but then you get up close and you see all my mistakes. And a lot of this is because I definitely rushed this paint job because I just didn't have the time to really get into the nitty-gritty details of it. And a lot of it is because Suzi is a personal robot, so I can't really justify spending so much time when I have like customs that people are paying me to do. So usually customs take a couple weeks to do just because I'm a perfectionist, but I tried to do this in a couple days. A lot of that was just drying time, but it did come out pretty good. What I ended up doing for the front parts of the legs is I just used the same material that I did before, and I didn't show that because I didn't want you guys to copy me because it is just straight up nail polish. So I just did that. I just cleaned it up basically and just sealed it in with some more varnish just to sort of get the dirtiness out of it. And the color match isn't exact, so the back legs, the new legs that I painted are a lot more silvery, but they do still have that sort of pink undertone, which I really like. So overall, I do really like how it came out. I think it could have come out better, but I do enjoy it nonetheless. If you guys enjoyed this type of video, let me know. I could do plenty more. If there's any particular type of customs you want to see me do, want to see how I do, want to see what tools I use, etc., etc. So if you have any suggestions for further videos in that realm, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!